Hello, everybody. Nice to see you. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're all keeping nice and warm on this cold and somewhat chilly afternoon. Very much raining here in Cape Town. I hope everybody's managing to keep warm. I was sort of like this, so sorry I didn't get dressed all pretty, kept my big jacket on. I'm really looking forward to this afternoon's chat on sort of foods that promote a little bit of anti-inflammatory effect in the body, as opposed to being pro-inflammatory. I think a lot of people, it's a topic that on everybody's mind. It has been for a while. We've had a few requests to speak about it. So please swipe in, let me know that you're here. There's so much information on the topic that I'm trying to condense it quite nicely. I've put together some slides for you. I'm really hoping that you've got a few questions. As I always say as well, is if you've got questions and you need a little bit more personal help with them, and we can always touch base, chat a little bit after the session as well. But I think it's nice to share your questions if you feel comfortable doing that, so that other people can also benefit. All right, so we are going to move across to the slideshow without any further ado, so we don't run out of time, and let's get going. All right, so first of all, what is inflammation? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Why does it happen in our body? And it's supposed to be a really good thing. It's part of our body's defense system against illness and injury. And without it, we would have a serious problem. It involves white blood cells and cytokines. And I'm sure a lot of you recognize the name cytokines. We've heard a lot of that in the news recently with the cytokine storm that's associated with COVID, where the body's sort of inflammation system, its immune system, it just goes completely out of sync. It just gets carried away entirely. And that causes a whole lot of negative effects, which actually can be very detrimental and can also be fatal. So typically you get inflammation if you knock yourself, or if you have a knee injury or a shoulder injury. There's going to be swelling, blood moves to the area, they'll be associated with pain and heat a lot of the time as well. But that would be more acute inflammation. That's your body's instant response to an attack or to injury. The problem comes into it when it's chronic inflammation. And often with chronic inflammation, we don't actually have we don't have the swelling, we don't have the pain, don't feel the feeling of heat. Sometimes it's just happening without us even being aware of it. So just to summarize as well, acute inflammation would be more protective in nature, whereas chronic inflammation can be quite destructive. And some of the major diseases that have been associated with chronic inflammation include things like cancer, heart disease, diabetes, arthritis, depression, as well as Alzheimer's. So as you can see, I mean, this area of research, I remember I was still a student, and we're talking many years back, it already came into play there, where people were realizing that if your body is in a state of constant inflammation, it actually increases your risk of developing a lot of illnesses, a lot of disorders that can otherwise really be prevented. So where do we start? Okay, so there are a huge number of reasons why you could be in a state of inflammation, why your body could be in a state of chronic inflammation. There are a number of medical conditions, and we're not going to have time today to cover any of that, but it can be related to gut health as well. It can be vitamin and mineral status. If you're deficient in certain vitamins and minerals, that increases your risk of having this chronic state of inflammation. Also linked to stress and cortisol levels, not always the easy one to control and manage, but so important. Activity levels, if you're not active, that can also be a risk factor for chronic inflammation. And then the quality of one's diet. So the three areas that I'm going to focus on today would be gut health, your vitamin and mineral status, and the quality of one's diet, and what we can do there to minimize the risk of having this chronic state of inflammation. So if we started with the gut health, now we actually covered a little bit of this when myself and Coach Heather did a talk at the beginning of the year. So you can always go back and listen to that Jeff Ed talk as well, where we spoke in detail about the gut microbiome. Now, when it comes to gut health, and you'll see at the bottom there, I maybe should have put it at the top, because in my opinion, those little bacteria that inhabit our gut play such a huge role. If you don't have those guys, if they're not happy, guys and girls, if they're not happy, invariably you're going to be suffering from some kind of disorder. Your whole body is going to be affected. So really important that you keep them happy. There's also, there's a whole lot, and we don't have time to go into too much detail here, but the main things that keep those guys happy is not to have too much in the way of saturated or animal fat and the refined carbs, so the sugary processed carbs. Also to focus more on healthy fats, the omega-3s, the monounsaturated fats, the olive oils, avos, nuts, seeds, and the likes. And then also plant proteins. And I know for a lot of us, myself included, only recently, maybe during lockdown actually, I only really started to include more plant proteins then and get creative, because often we don't know how to get in the plant proteins or to make them taste nice. And typically you get from things like tofu, from your legumes, your beans, your lentils, your chickpeas, all really good source of plant protein that come with a whole lot of good source of fiber as well, and healthy fats. And all of these nutrients work together to promote a really healthy and strong gut microbiome. Okay, and then we spoke, I think, before as well about prebiotics. Prebiotics are the foods that basically you use to feed these bacteria. And depending on what you eat, you'll promote the different species of bacteria. So, for example, if you were to eat a whole lot of saturated fat and sugar afterwards in pudding form, you would definitely promote the not so healthy guys over the healthier guys. If you're eating a diet that's more Mediterranean based with lots of fiber, lots of plant protein, you'll be promoting growth of the good guys. And as soon as you've got a lot of the good guys, you're naturally going to have a much healthier gut membrane. And that gut membrane or that gut barrier is the first port of call when it comes to immune system. And it's so important that it is healthy. Often also, if it's not healthy, there might be sort of problems with absorption of foods as well. And that's a whole different talk all on its own as well. But as soon as you're not absorbing all the vitamins, nutrients, minerals that you're eating, you might be eating a perfect diet, but if you're unable to absorb all of those, you're obviously not going to be in a very healthy state. Okay, so then let's go back to the top again. When it comes to gut health, there are certain foods that some people find trigger IBS-like symptoms, that they are intolerant to them, not necessarily allergic to those foods, but they can only handle a small amount. And once they go over and above that small amount, they have symptoms, whether it's bloating, whether it's pain, diarrhea, constipation. There's a numerous set of or the whole big set of different symptoms that you could suffer from. Now, what I would urge you to do, because the problem with having these intolerances is that you're not creating a very nice and healthy environment in your gut. And what will happen is that will predispose you to more inflammation in that area. You might not feel it initially, but sort of chronic inflammation will then have some negative effects down the line as well. Could potentially develop into something more sinister, sort of an inflammatory bowel disease, something like that. Or it just literally interferes with the health of that gut lining, which means absorption of your food is compromised as well. So what I would suggest there, if you are thinking that you might have an intolerance, if there's a certain food that you know when you eat it or you eat too much of it or you eat it in combination with another food, it causes some of these symptoms, then keep a bit of a food diary. And I know always I can picture a lot of my past clients in my dietitian practice rolling their eyes at the mention of a food diary. It's a little bit of hard work, a little bit of homework actually, but so worth doing. So you write down what you've eaten and then you record some of the side effects or the symptoms you experience afterwards. And remember, food takes a while to move through the digestive tract. It's different for everyone. But it could be that a symptom you experience the next day or the day after that could actually be related to a food that you ate today. So it's not always going to be instant. And that's important to remember as well. So once you've kept your food diary, you've shared it with your coach or your dietitian, and you now say, okay, you know what? I think these are the 5 foods that are causing a problem, potentially. So then what we do is we take all of those foods out for about 2 to 3 weeks, and then let your gut sort of restore, recover, and then we slowly introduce them one at a time for 2 to 3 days. And you see, well, that one actually I'm absolutely fine with. You introduce another food and like, hang on now, suddenly there's a problem. It could be a case of on their own, you can tolerate certain foods, but as soon as you have maybe your milk, regular cow's milk, plus you add something like chickpeas or some lentils, suddenly now the combination of all of that becomes a problem. So it's all related to amounts as well as combinations and the type of food. So it really just empowers you. It gives you, it puts you in a position to know what foods are going to potentially be causing a problem and potentially be causing sort of this long-term, even if it's low-grade, inflammation of the gut. The next thing that we always need to consider when it comes to gut health is stress management. And that's the one that is really, in my mind, in my opinion, the biggest challenge. But it is that the stress that you feel, the stress that you experience here, emotions you experience here, there is a direct link with your gut. And I'm sure you all know that. If there's something that you're doing and you get nervous, maybe you're giving a talk, a Jeff Ed talk, for example, and you're feeling a little bit nervous beforehand, you'll feel almost that feeling of butterflies in your stomach. So that's this feeling moving to your stomach and playing out in your stomach. If you're about to do a race or whatever it is. So I think we've all experienced that connection between the brain and the gut. And anything that's going to cause stress often will affect the gut as well. So the message there is you need to sort of put measures in place. Now obviously I was joking about me being nervous before the talk. That's very much an acute thing. It's not ongoing stress. I'm not having sleepless nights over it for days and after and before. But something that's obviously going to cause a lot more stress, and it's on an ongoing basis. So if you've got a very stressful work, a very stressful job, and it's constant, you're never getting a break from it. That's the kind of stress that I'm referring to. You get the acute stress, but you get that ongoing stress. And sometimes you're managing fine, but you just add one extra stress to the mix, and suddenly it's not manageable anymore. So the first step there is you really need to pinpoint what the stresses are, and then you need to try and put measures in place to control them so that it's not an ongoing chronic situation of high stress levels. And I mean, we don't have enough time, but stress will get high levels of cortisol. Cortisol interferes with insulin, and then you've got that whole cycle as well, too much insulin and the difficulty losing weight if you need to lose weight, difficulty losing weight specifically around the abdominal area. So all of that is linked as well. The reason I brought that up is that another risk factor for this chronic inflammation is being overweight as well. All right, so the next area that we were going to chat about were vitamins and minerals. So this is quite an interesting one. Vitamin D definitely comes up quite strongly there. It's got a function that its main function is to regulate, when it comes to inflammation, is to regulate the levels of cytokines. So as you know, if cytokine levels go up too high, you can get into this horrible cycle of having too much inflammation. Normally the body can pull back on that and it will say, okay, we're going to stop making those cytokines. We don't need as much the inflammation. The job is done. We don't need to continue. And then the research has shown, quite a bit of research has shown, that if your vitamin D levels are deficient, you are potentially setting yourself up for problems with inflammation, ongoing chronic problems with inflammation. It's not to say that everybody needs to rush off and supplement with 50,000 units once a week. Absolutely not. Vitamin D is a fat-soluble vitamin as well, which means it gets stored in the body. So you don't want to overdose on vitamin D by any means. The requirements, daily requirements, are less than 1,000 units. So that just puts into picture, when I say 50,000 units, it's a big dose. If you are incredibly deficient, and the only way you'll find out is by doing a blood test, then yes, it's worth going sort of the higher doses for a short period of time, retesting, and then seeing where you're at. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, I recommend everybody sort of have their vitamin D levels tested at some point or another. Sometimes you need to supplement just with a low dose, maybe 1,000 units once a day or every second day during winter, because our main source of vitamin D is always going to be from the sun. And especially in Cape Town, if you live in Cape Town like me, it's really, really challenging to get enough sun. And the angle of the rays of the sun actually is not optimal either, even if you are in the sun, to get enough vitamin D being made. The reason I say to get enough sun is purely in winter because of those angles of the rays. I mean, Cape Town, you can get lots of sun if you want, if you're not working all day. But yeah, so that's the challenge behind vitamin D. And the other challenge is a lot of us, because of the scare of skin cancer as well, we cover ourselves up in cream, so you don't actually even get the benefit of being outdoors in the sun as well. So the message there with vitamin D is check your levels. If they're very deficient, yes, you need to supplement higher dose. If they're not, then don't go more than 1,000 units a day, and always go with vitamin D3 rather than D2. Much more effective and much more effective, but also you bypass one of the steps where you convert to the active form of vitamin D. Right, the next mineral that we're going to chat about is magnesium. Now, there's not a huge amount of research around magnesium and inflammation in humans, but there's quite a bit to show that a deficiency of magnesium that done animal studies is linked to that sort of situation of chronic inflammation as well. Now, magnesium is something that you find all over the place. So if you're eating a healthy diet, whole foods, you should be absolutely fine. You shouldn't need to supplement. The other ones, and I'm sure a lot of you will know about these ones, your vitamins A, C, and E, all known for being antioxidants, and again, very widespread in the food that we eat. Then you get your copper, your zinc, selenium, also antioxidants. So if you're eating a good, wholesome diet, there really is no need to supplement with those bottom three. Vitamin D, yes, potentially if you're somebody who's not getting enough sunlight, potentially Cape Town in the winter, and if you're prone to it, if you don't have enough stores from summer. So now you might ask yourself, where can I get all of these vitamins, minerals? A lot of this you will know already, but magnesium, dark chocolate. So that's the good news. Now, obviously, it doesn't give you free access to many slabs of dark chocolate. The dark chocolate, very well known for having good magnesium, having lots of antioxidants in it. Also whole grains, nuts, seeds, legumes. So those are all your chickpeas, lentils, beans, tofu, avocado as well, another good one. So all nice, good, healthy foods there. And easy to find. Vitamin A would typically be your dark green leafy veg, your orange and yellow veg, and fruit. So examples being mango, papaya, carrots, sweet potato, pumpkin, squash. A little bit of a repetition there, I think, with the carrots. I'm really pushing carrots here. And peppers as well, your colorful peppers, avo, eggs, fish. Okay, vitamin E, you'd find peanut butter, almonds, sunflower seeds, spinach, pumpkin, asparagus, avo, and the list goes on. And then vitamin C foods would be your citrus fruits, your berries, kiwi fruit, peppers, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, potatoes. Even sometimes people don't realize there's vitamin C in potatoes, and important to have the skin on the potato because it will lie just beneath there. And then also tomatoes. So as you can see, you can actually access all of these vitamins and minerals quite easily in the food that we eat on a daily basis. Okay, so now you'll see there's quite a bit of repetition here. Which is good. It reinforces what I'm saying. But if we look at specific foods that have been linked to increased inflammation, so this is sort of where most of the research has been around. And the one that comes out very strongly at the top there is the trans fat containing foods. So it'd be like your hard brick margarine, deep fried fast foods, places where I would never go to sort of a place that I don't know well to get fast foods or to get any kind of food. You don't want them to be reusing the oil over and over again. That can form trans fats over time, which is not great. Your non-dairy coffee creamers, shortening, any foods that are hydrogenated, and even some brands of microwavable popcorn. Although there are a lot of regulations that have been put in place in recent years around trans fats, so it's not so easy for those to creep in anymore, which is really a positive thing, just because of that incredibly strong link between too many trans fats and heart disease, inflammation. So the good news is you're going to have to search quite hard to find foods that do contain trans fats. And my biggest concern would be those fast foods place and the deep fried foods where potentially people are reusing oil over and over again. Right, the next area is red meat and processed meats. So it's not to say don't eat red meat. I'm not saying that at all. I might be saying don't eat processed meats too much, but I know treats occasionally, that's absolutely fine. But there's a little bit of trans fat in red meat. It's not the biggest source in the world, but just be aware of it. It's an accumulation of the trans fat that can cause a problem over time. The other thing with red meat and sort of processed meats is the saturated fat. So there's definitely a link between too much saturated fat and inflammation as well. Then all those sugar-sweetened beverages and any processed or refined and processed carbs, too much sugar equal inflammation. Too much saturated fat equals inflammation. Fried foods, I've mentioned that up above with respect to the trans fat, and especially those foods and meals that have been fried in oil that just gets reused over and over again. Okay, and then also sort of indirectly, any hectically calorie-dense foods due to the weight gain. So potentially if you're having all the healthiest foods in the world, but they're very calorie-dense and you're picking up weight, that actually on its own is going to increase the risk for inflammation. Being overweight is definitely a risk factor for this chronic inflammation. All right, so foods, this is possibly what you've all been waiting for, foods that reduce inflammation. Okay, so now these also, if you look in the research, you'll definitely come across all of these. It's your olive oil, your tomatoes, your green leafy veg. And you're going to see there's quite a bit of overlap with the previous slides here. So spinach, kale, your fruits like berries, citrus, apples, tea, dark chocolate features there again, red wine features, and I had to put down that moderate word there. Fatty fish like salmon, tuna, mackerel, sardines, nuts, nice array of different nuts. Every nut has a different profile of healthy fats as well. So it's important to have diversity there. And then there's quite a bit of research around turmeric as well. Now the active component of turmeric is your curcumin. But the problem there is that it's not very well absorbed. So although sort of the laboratory studies show that it's quite a good and powerful sort of anti-inflammatory component or ingredient, it's very difficult for you to actually absorb the amount that you need to get that positive effect. Okay, so moving on, I want to leave a few minutes for questions. So take-home messages, basically eat a low glycemic load diet. What you need to take from that is you need to think whole foods. Don't have meals, and I've covered this, I think, in every single talk I've done, Jeff talk I've done, but try and always combine your meals. So if you're having carbohydrate, combine with a healthy protein, and always choose a carbohydrate that's a whole food as well, so there's lots of fiber, and then also add to the mix a nice healthy fat. As soon as you do that, you're creating this barrier. So when those sugar molecules break down in the gut, they don't just have free access to the bloodstream, they need to push against this barrier, they need to fight to get access into the bloodstream. And just simply by doing that, you're going to control that spike in blood sugar levels and the associated spike in insulin levels as well. Right, the next point is eat whole grains. Again, it's a lot of repetition here, but eat whole grains, fruit, vegetables, nuts, seeds, legumes, olive oil, and fatty fish. In other words, I've just described the Mediterranean diet. So huge fan of the Mediterranean diet. I think it's practical, it's delicious, it's sustainable. And then also it's low in saturated fats. And again, that's something that you really need to limit, saturated fat, trans fats. And again, think fast foods, animal fats. Drink alcohol in moderation. If you do drink, don't start drinking if you don't. Keep active and maintain a healthy body weight as well. There's definitely a link between exercise and increased production of the anti-inflammatory cytokines as well. So more exercise you do, often the less you sort of curb it, you manage it, the less anti-inflammatory cytokines, the less inflammatory cytokines you produce, and it has an anti-inflammatory effect. All right, so without further ado, questions. I'm hoping there's a few that come through here. Let me go right to the beginning. Hi, Pat. Nice to see you. So I can't see everybody's name, unfortunately, but for those who, hi, Michelle, can see your name. Oh, gosh. Acute rotator cuff tendonitis, welcome to my world, Auntie Pat. That's my go-to as well, unfortunately. Good luck with that. I hope it feels better soon. And okay, hello everybody, lovely to see you all. Okay, so I've got one question here. Would autoimmune diseases be considered a state of chronic inflammation? So yes, some of the autoimmune diseases, absolutely. There is, unfortunately, and that's sort of the disease category I had on one of the first slides there. So that is a state of chronic inflammation, and a lot of the time there, one has to treat that inflammation with medicine, with drugs. Just to keep it under control. So the whole point there is that you want to treat conditions like that from all different angles. Yes, unfortunately with autoimmune diseases, there's a place for drugs and you need to sort of manage it that way. But you also want to optimize your diet intake. You want to have an optimal weight as well. Because at each time, if you're eating well, eating an anti-inflammatory diet, you're at a good healthy weight, you're reducing the amount of inflammation, which means hopefully you can reduce the dose of the medicines you are taking. And as soon as you do that, you also reduce potential side effects. Okay, hello everybody. Next comment here, gluten, dairy, and sugar are trigger foods for me. So those are common ones. They definitely are common. Gluten, often with gluten, it's actually a dose thing as well. So you can potentially manage a little bit of gluten, but if you have it with dairy and sugar all together, it becomes problematic. So my advice to people is don't just automatically take out gluten. If you suspect it is, see if you can tolerate a little bit of gluten here and there, because often the foods containing gluten give you a lot of good, healthy fiber as well. Add that to the mix. So you don't want to just sort of take that away and lose the benefit of the fiber. Often the gluten-free foods that you find have not got that nice fiber in them. They're not necessarily the healthiest options either. But if you know for sure that you've got a gluten intolerance, you obviously need to control how much you eat. Okay, let me see if there's anything else here. Okay, got a question from Claire. Thanks, Claire. How many times per week is max for red meat? So, controversial question, but what I would typically say, and my recommendation would be no more than 2 to 3 times per week. So if you're having red meat at lunch, that counts as one, not just dinner meals. But yeah, 2 to 3 meals per week have your red meat, and always opt for the lean forms of red meat. So go for that extra lean mince, for example. If you're having lamb, try and cut off all the visible fat as well. It's the fat that's problematic with the red meat. Brilliant source of iron, brilliant source of protein. It's the fat that comes with it that can be that is the problem. Okay, you and me both anti-pat, that cortisone, but I reached a point where I actually needed one for my shoulder for the tendonitis, couldn't move at all. Yeah, I think there's a time and place, but I'm with you on that. Okay, sorry, I can't see your name as well, but question is, any advice on diet and osteoarthritis? So that's also hugely topical, and I'd actually love to do a separate talk on that. I'll work on something around that as well in the future, because we won't have time now to go into too much detail. But yeah, there's a whole lot of key players there, calcium, but also all those anti-inflammatory. Very much you want to follow an anti-inflammatory diet. Vitamin D becomes important there as well. So thank you for that idea. We'll do a talk on that alone. Okay. Thank you. I'm just reading some of the comments. Rheumatoid arthritis as well. Exercise, absolutely, Janine. So exercise is a massive, massive component of all of this. It really is. You want to combine all of that. So exercise, we know the benefits of exercise. We don't need to sell that to you, especially this audience. But absolutely, exercise helps you achieve a good, healthy weight, a good, healthy body composition. But even just all the the exercise itself with oxygen flow, its anti-inflammatory properties, all of that, there are huge, huge benefits. The feel-good hormones that come from exercise, which help control your stress levels as well. That's massive, massive, massive. So exercise, absolutely, very, very important component of managing chronic inflammation. Okay, another question here, how often should I let my kids have fast food? Once a month? Is the question. That's not my answer, but the question is, should it be once a month? Obviously would like them to never, but we know children, absolutely. So I've got 2 girls, age 11 and 9, and we certainly have to resort to takeaways every now and then. And yeah, you don't want to deprive kids completely. So our thing is, it would never be more than once a month. At one point, we're on a good thing with once a term, sort of the last day of school. But yeah, no, we haven't stuck to that religiously. But I would say a practical thing is once a month. And the important thing when it comes to takeaways as well and fast food is you need your kids to understand that it's a treat. It's not the norm by any means. So it shouldn't be every weekend, for example. They need to understand that fast foods are very much a treat, and it should be considered a treat. It should be something they look forward to. Yes, that's fine, but it's not going to become a daily staple. Same with chocolates, chips, cookies, biscuits, all of that. They need to understand from a very young age that it's not just free access. There's no treats covered that when you feel like it every day, you just go grab something. That message must be very clear from word go. Okay, let's have this look here. Does food intake, okay, thanks Claire, another question. Does food intake to help gut differ for children? Is there anything else they need? Okay, so you'll find that it's actually very similar. You'll find sort of portions of foods and the types of foods that might benefit kids. They might not necessarily be too pleased to eat, like some of the prebiotic foods, asparagus and artichokes, and I know I can't get my girls to eat that. But so you'll find that it's a little bit challenging maybe with the kids. But if you get them to have sort of their yogurts, and we only have the plain fat-free yogurt, so there's no sugar added to the mix. We're getting our fat from nuts and seeds and that type of thing. That's great. That's normally accepted quite nicely by children. And always try and get in as many sort of the biggest variety of vegetables that you possibly can. Go for all the different colors as well. That's so important, because as soon as you're adding all those different colors, you're getting in your vitamin C, your A, your E, all of that. I wouldn't recommend trying to supplement or give your kids supplements by any means. Always try and get it via food first. Obviously, there's exceptions to the rule, but supplements, the dose of supplements, I mean, there's side effects to those as well. So it's not a case of, oh, this is easy, I'll just get all the vitamins and minerals I need from a pill. It's not that easy. It's not that effective, and there's actually risks associated. Even with something like vitamin E, there's a whole lot of research to show it increases risk of certain cancers. So you want to try, it's a very valuable vitamin, but you want to, as far as possible, try and get all of those vitamins, minerals via your food and introducing healthy foods. I got a bit carried away there, sorry. Claire, I hope I answered your question there. Okay, I think this is gonna have to be our last question. We're running out of time. If you put your family on a probiotic, is there a limit to how long it will work? For example, do you have to swap the brands around or swap for a few weeks and start again? Okay, so that's a very good question. I typically wouldn't go on the probiotic for more than 2 weeks. And purely because I'm not sure if it's still working at that point. It's more about replenishing the supplies. And I would typically give a probiotic if somebody's been really ill, immune system's been compromised, if they've had a stomach bug, or they're just really, really suffering with their stomach and they're sort of having very watery stools or diarrhea on a regular basis. But the main thing you need to do is, I mean, if you're flushing out those bacteria all the time, it becomes problematic. But you need to, so that's when you do replenish it, but you need to make sure that your diet is feeding the existing bacteria as well. That's the only way you can get them to replenish as well, is that you need to create a good, healthy environment for those bacteria to thrive in. You can't just rely on taking a pill to keep taking in new bacteria. They're not going to last there unless you're feeding them correctly. Okay, so unfortunately we are out of time now. That went so quickly. Please keep posting your questions. I'll jump back on and try and answer them. Otherwise, you're welcome to direct message me as well. We can set aside some time to chat in more detail if you need help with anything. But thank you for watching, and hope you have a super afternoon. Hope to see a lot of you tomorrow at the Go for Gold workouts. Swipe in and say hi if you're there. But yeah, keep warm. Chat soon. Cheers.